You don't always choose the fight. Sometimes the fight chooses you, right on the very land of your ancestors. My name is Ben Carter. I just wanted to live peacefully by the lake where my grandfather once built a cabin, taught me how to fish, and taught me that freedom must be guarded. Every inch of land, every drop of water. But when the Maple Ridge HOA wove a web of lies, seized Carter Lake, and tried to sell it off to foreign investors, I knew I had to stand up. This is the story of how one man didn't just protect his family's property, but also restored honor and freedom to an entire community that had been deceived. And trust me, there's nothing more satisfying than watching greed get devoured by its own trap. That morning, standing on the old wooden porch with the Maple Ridge HOA's letter in my hand, I swear to God, I had never felt my blood boil like that. The demand letter slammed straight into my face. You must remove the boat from the lake within 48 hours or face a fine of $500 per day. If not removed, we will tow the boat away. I nearly spat my coffee all over the paper. It wasn't just the commanding, arrogant tone, talking to me like I was some disobedient child, but also the sheer, unbelievable audacity. My boat, on my lake, and they dared to tell me to move it? I let out a dry, bitter laugh, the kind only those who've battled self-appointed bureaucrats will understand. They had no idea who they were messing with. Maple Ridge HOA, that sham of an association, had latched onto the land surrounding the lake ever since before I returned. They'd been using my lake for fishing tournaments, gatherings, and parties for years, acting like it was their own community property. And now, when the real owner was finally back, they dared to issue orders? They had just signed their own declaration of war without even realizing it. To give you some context, I used to be the lead engineer in cybersecurity out in Dallas for nearly 15 years. High-pressure job, successful career, but it drained the life out of me. When I sold the company, for more money than I'd ever dreamed of, I knew it was time to leave that brutal world behind. I needed peace. I needed a place that truly belonged to me. And I chose to return to the place my heart had never truly left. Carter Lake. A piece of land my grandfather had purchased back in the 1950s. 50 acres of crystal-clear water surrounded by forest and open fields, a raw gem in an increasingly chaotic world. My grandfather, Thomas Carter, wasn't just a landowner. He was a local legend, the man who once single-handedly stood against the waste companies trying to pollute the water, preserving the lake's pristine beauty. "Water is life, Ben," he used to say, eyes shining bright. "Never let anyone put a price tag over nature." I never forgot those words. When both he and my father passed away, the lake became mine. But I had neglected it for nearly 5 years, swept away by work. It wasn't until I was exhausted to my core that I finally returned, renovating the old cabin, keeping its rustic charm but adding a few modern comforts. And since then, my life had been blissfully simple, morning coffee on the dock, watching the mist curl over the water. Afternoons fixing up the house, adding to the family's living portrait. Evenings drifting my boat into the middle of the lake, fishing, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. Absolute peace, until today. As my eyes scanned the cold, bureaucratic lines of the HOA letter, I knew one thing. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an invasion. And I, Ben Carter, was not the kind of man you could push around. I was still gripping that ridiculous demand letter in my hand when the cabin phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, I couldn't help but smile. Sam Parker, the old neighbor about a quarter-mile away from my place, and the only person around here I could truly call a friend. Sam was over 70 now, his skin leathery from the sun, his hands calloused from building everything with his own 2 hands. He had been a close friend of my grandfather's. I picked up the phone. "Got a cold bucket of water dumped on your head this morning, Ben?" Sam rasped with a chuckle. I smirked. Less than 30 minutes into my first cup of coffee, and I already wanted to smash my table. I gave Sam a quick rundown about the violation notice and the demand to remove my boat to align with the community's visual standards, courtesy of Maple Ridge HOA. Sam just grunted. Those vultures started getting itchy ever since Maple Ridge expanded north about 10 years ago. They think just because they have a fancy front gate and color-coordinated houses, they can rule over the whole damn lake, I growled. Sam, did you know they've been using my lake all this time? He sighed heavily. Son, they didn't just use it. They threw parties, hosted fishing tournaments, set up temporary docks, and advertised your grandfather's lake like it was their own. They even formed this thing called the Elite Anglers Club. Just hearing the name makes me want to puke. Those rod-wielding posers dressed like they were entering a fashion show couldn't even fish better than a bunch of middle schoolers. Clenched the phone tighter. So while I was busy wrestling the outside world, they had quietly turned my lake into their private playground. No permission, no lease payments, no shred of respect. When I hung up, anger wasn't the only thing burning inside me. I felt betrayed. I stormed back into the cabin, flipped open my laptop, and Googled Maple Ridge Estates HOA. And what I found made my skin crawl. Right there on the HOA's homepage, under Community and Events, a flood of photos loaded. Men in pro fishing shirts and caps with the Elite Anglers logo proudly holding up their catches, standing right on my grandfather's old dock. Rows of tents pitched along the shoreline, land that I owned up to 15 feet from the water's edge. Barbecue parties, award ceremonies, vibrant posters shouting, Maple Lake, our community's precious gem, Maple Lake, a community's precious gem. They were talking about Carter Lake, the land my ancestors had poured blood, sweat, and dreams into. I scrolled further, the blood in my veins boiling hotter with every flick of the mouse. Next week, they were planning their biggest fishing tournament of the year, cash prizes, a full-blown lakeside BBQ party, right on my land. No permits, no agreements, no damn permission. They hadn't just stolen my property. They were stealing the history, the soul of my family. I sat frozen before the screen, my hand clenched so tightly it turned white. I knew then I stood at a crossroads, bow my head and let them strip away what little was left, or fight without mercy to take back everything that was mine. I took a deep breath. The decision had already been made the moment I read the first line of that violation letter. I dialed the number of an old college friend, Emma Lawson, a renowned environmental lawyer, a woman who had made her name winning cases about land and water rights. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Ben Carter? Well, it's been a long time. You're not calling me at this hour just for small talk, are you? I gave a low chuckle. Emma, I think I've just opened a war, and I'll need the best to ride shotgun. My conversation with Emma Lawson was quick and to the point with no flowery nonsense. I summarized the situation for her. My boat had been slapped with a violation notice. My family's lake had been commandeered to host fishing tournaments for years. Maple Ridge HOA was fabricating a non-existent claim of ownership. On the other end, Emma merely chuckled dryly, Ben, they're not just overstepping. They're marching straight into annihilation, and they have no idea. I gripped the phone tighter and said bluntly, I don't want a halfway solution. I want to smash this scam. With undeniable evidence, a legal trap they can't crawl out of. My grandfather defended this lake with his blood and sweat. I won't let anyone steal it, Emma answered in a firm tone. Then listen carefully. Do not respond to the HOA's letter. Do not engage with them directly. We need evidence, lots of it, before making any move. That very day, I sprang into action. I headed into town, straight to the security equipment store. 3 hours later, I returned to the cabin with 6 wireless waterproof cameras with 24/7 recording and real-time alerts to my phone, a massive external hard drive to store all the footage, a mini GPS tracking device kit. I installed the cameras in strategic positions around the lake. One aimed directly at the dock, where the elite anglers loved to gather, another covering the entire eastern lawn, where they were setting up tents, one hidden high in an ancient willow tree, surveying the makeshift parking area. From now on, no one would step onto my land without me knowing. That night, my old cabin transformed into a makeshift command center. The glow from the surveillance screens lit up the small room, every movement around the lake displayed in sharp detail. On the battered wooden table beside me, I spread out the original land deeds my grandfather had left behind, clearly confirming that Carter Lake and 15 feet of its shoreline were private property, old and new land surveys, which I meticulously cross-referenced line by line, property tax records, paid without fail for 70 years straight. Each document was like a silver bullet, ready to fire when the time came. Meanwhile, Emma wasn't sitting idle either. She contacted a friend at the Forest Hill County Land Office, requesting a full search of the development files for Maple Ridge. The results came back faster than we expected. Maple Ridge HOA had never been granted any authority over Carter Lake. There were no documents placing the lake within their development boundary. It was all an elaborate fabrication, a slow-burn con job aimed at legalizing their trespassing. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They had made a huge mistake thinking I was some country bumpkin they could bully. They didn't know I had once gone toe-to-toe with real sharks in the tech world, where a single misstep could wipe out a company overnight. And I survived to tell the tale. Now I was going to apply everything I had learned, and then some, to crush this smug little HOA. Before heading to bed, I double-checked the camera feeds one last time. Outside, the moonlight shimmered across the lake, calm and beautiful, peaceful. But it was only the peace before the storm. 1 week after receiving the violation notice, I got an email invitation from the Maple Ridge HOA for a community meeting. The content sounded polite enough. Discussion on community issues, particularly the standards for lake usage. All residents are encouraged to attend, I chuckled. They weren't inviting me to discuss. They were inviting me to educate. Or to intimidate. Fine. I was more than ready for their little game. On Thursday night, I put on an old flannel shirt, faded jeans, and a pair of heavy cowboy boots. No suit. No tie. I brought only one thing: the truth. When I walked into the Maple Ridge Community Center, the air in the room noticeably shifted. Around 30 residents were there, mostly middle-aged and older, all dressed up neatly, stiff expressions etched into their faces. On the small stage, under cold yellow lights, stood Richard Watson, president of the Maple Ridge HOA. He was over 50, with a shock of fluffy gray hair, wearing a deep blue blazer and wearing the forced smile typical of local politicians. He stood there, one hand gripping the wooden podium, the other waving around documents, droning on about grass height regulations, mailbox design standards, approved garage door colors. It sounded more like he was running a corporation, not managing a community. And finally, he got to the real hot topic. We need to seriously discuss the issue of certain residents failing to comply with community standards regarding lake usage. There have been reports of an unregistered boat docked illegally. Let me reiterate. All watercraft must comply with community standards to preserve the area's aesthetic appeal. His voice sharpened on the word must. The room began to murmur. Eyes darted around. I raised my hand. A simple gesture, but it froze the entire room. Richard squinted, pausing slightly before saying, "Yes, sir, in the back?" I stood up, voice steady and firm. "I just have one simple question, Mr. Watson. When you say community lake, may I ask, who actually owns that lake?" The entire room fell silent. A few heads snapped up, whispering started to spread. In the S-Day front row, a blonde woman frantically flipped through the HOA handbook. Richard cleared his throat, flashing a tight, awkward smile. "Oh, the lake has been under HOA management for a long time. According to the original development agreements, we have the right to supervise activities on the lake for the community's benefit." I narrowed my eyes. "Which development agreement exactly? Could you provide a copy of that document?" A real ripple of unease spread through the room. An old man with a silver beard sitting in the third row turned to his friend, grumbling. Richard fidgeted at the podium. "Well, these are historical arrangements. There's no need to delve into technical details during tonight's meeting. What's important is that we maintain the community's aesthetics and property values." I couldn't help myself. I laughed out loud. Every head turned toward me. I stepped forward, voice ringing clear. "My name is Ben Carter, grandson of Thomas Carter, the man who bought the entirety of this lake in 1953. Carter Lake, along with 15 feet of land around the shoreline, has been in my family's private ownership ever since. I have the deeds, the official surveys, and the updated property tax receipts to prove it. And if necessary, I'm more than willing to bring this to court." I paused, letting my words sink in. "So, if Mr. Watson, or anyone else here, thinks they have the authority to dictate where I dock my boat on my family's lake, then you're sadly mistaken, because what you're doing violates both civil law and private property rights." The room exploded in murmurs and a few surprised chuckles. Several residents looked stunned. Others began frowning at Richard. Richard Watson's face flushed crimson, his lips clamped shut as he struggled to recover. "I'm sure there must be some misunderstanding. We will review the documents." Stepped back, arms folded across my chest. "Feel free to review them. But in the meantime, I strongly advise you not to touch my boat, and do not organize any more events on Carter family land unless you want to be sued for trespassing and fraud." I shot Richard a direct, unwavering look, the look of a man who doesn't negotiate with thieves. Then I turned and strode out of the community hall, leaving behind a swirling crowd, a pale-faced HOA president, and the first fiery blow against the Maple Ridge Empire. The very next morning after that meeting, as I was sipping a strong black coffee out on the porch, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID lit up. "Sam Parker," I answered, still carrying a bit of the satisfaction from last night's victory. "Calling this early, Sam? Got some hot news?" Sam's raspy chuckle came through the line. "Hot news is putting it mildly, Ben. Listen to this. My niece, who works over at the county planning office, just tipped me off. Maple Ridge HOA just filed paperwork to expand the development. A luxury resort project right on the shores of Carter Lake, marina, lakeside villas, golf course, the whole damn package." I froze. This wasn't about a few casual fishing tournaments. They were planning to turn my family's lake into the backyard of a multi-million-dollar resort? I slumped into the old wooden chair, clutching my coffee cup so hard my knuckles turned white. Suddenly, all the puzzle pieces snapped into place. The harmless fishing tournaments over the years, the vague, cheerful write-ups about Maple Lake, the heart of our community, the push to remove my boat because it didn't fit the aesthetic. All of it aimed at one single goal, to fabricate a narrative that the HOA had managed the lake for years, to fool the government and investors into thinking they had rights to the lake. And me, the rightful heir, just a minor obstacle. An isolated landowner thought they could steamroll if I wasn't paying attention. They picked the wrong man. I immediately called Emma Lawson and filled her in. She wasn't even surprised. Classic. Dirty developers always create a false reality. They squat on public or neglected private land, act like it's theirs, and hope nobody fights back. They figured you were some reclusive hick they could bully, Ben. They didn't expect to poke a wolf. My voice turned to ice. So what's the plan? Emma gave a short laugh. We let them dig their own grave a little deeper. The more evidence of HOA land abuse we gather, the better. We're going to not just shut down their resort. If we do this right, we're sending a few of them straight to jail for investment fraud. We got to work immediately. Emma combed through every land registry and Maple Ridge development plan she could access through the planning department. And with the information we uncovered, we confirmed Carter Lake was never included in the original Maple Ridge development maps. No contracts, no land use permits, no rights to natural resource exploitation. Every fishing tournament, every gathering, every so-called community event. Over the years, blatant trespassing on private property. Carter Lake belonged to me. They didn't have a single sheet of paper to back their lies. Only a mountain of crimes stacking up. And it didn't stop there. That evening, as I was checking the live feed from the security cameras around the lake, something new popped up, and I nearly spat out my beer. On the eastern shore, squarely within my private property line, a group of well-dressed men and women had gathered, waving around blueprints and design renderings, pointing, measuring, animatedly discussing. Emma immediately confirmed. They're giving investors a tour. They're trying to sell your land. Land they don't own a single damn inch of. I gave a cold, slow smile. Fine. Let them parade around. Let them dream big. I'd let them dig their hole nice and deep, and then I would bury their entire greedy little empire in it. Saturday morning, the very day Maple Ridge HOA was hosting the Elite Anglers Championship at Carter Lake. The sky was clear, a light breeze whispering across the water. A perfect day for a hunt. From the porch of the cabin, Emma and I sat, silently armed with binoculars and a camera fitted with a telephoto lens as long as a howitzer. On the eastern shore, the event was already in full swing. Dozens of SUVs packed the open field, land that belonged to me. Groups clad in professional fishing gear were pitching tents, setting up tarps, prepping for a barbecue. Boats floated. Lazily across the lake, elite anglers' flags fluttering proudly. Off to one side, I spotted Richard Watson, the HOA president, sporting a light blue polo, carrying a portfolio, leading a group of investors on a grand tour. They had even erected mock-up renderings, a flashy marina, lakeside villas, a golf course, all of it sprawling across land that was legally mine, as if they already owned it. Little did they know every step they took was being meticulously documented by Emma and me. Indisputable evidence being captured in real time. Emma leaned closer, whispering, her voice as cold as steel. That's enough. We've got images of the investors, the land sale materials, audio recordings of Richard claiming lake management rights. We just need the final blow. I nodded. It was time. Emma pulled out her phone and called the county courthouse. Thanks to the mountain of evidence we already had, including the Carter Lake ownership deeds, proof of HOA hosting an unauthorized event on private property, proof of Richard Watson impersonating ownership to defraud investors, we secured an emergency court order, a cease and desist for trespassing on private property, and a mandate for the immediate shutdown of all activities. About 45 minutes later, I heard the rumble of a vehicle approaching. A Forest Hill County Sheriff's patrol truck rolled up to the lakefront. Inside was Deputy Marshal, a tall, stone-faced man from out west, and according to Emma, someone who despised HOA overreach with a passion. We stepped off the porch, documents in hand. Marshal gave a small nod. Let's do this. We walked straight into the heart of the event. A sharp blast of Marshal's whistle cut through the air. Every head turned toward us. Standing tall, Marshal read aloud from the court order. By emergency order of the Forest Hill County Court, all activities at Carter Lake are to cease immediately. This is private property. All unauthorized individuals must vacate the premises at once. Chaos erupted. Elite anglers scrambled to collapse tents, pack up rods, haul boats back to shore. Angry murmurs and panicked shouts echoed across the field. The group of investors stood frozen, wide-eyed, their faces a mix of shock and growing fury. Richard Watson elbowed his way through the crowd toward me, his face blazing red. "Ben! Ben! This is just a misunderstanding. We can work something out." I'm sure I cut him off coldly, my voice like ice. "A misunderstanding? You lied to the residents that you managed this lake. You paraded investors around selling land that was never yours. You hosted an illegal event on private property. You started a multi-million-dollar fraud operation on the Carter family's back." I took a step closer, locking eyes with him. "A misunderstanding? No, Richard. This is your ending." The crowd started shouting, "What the hell are we paying HOA fees for? We've been scammed? The lake isn't community property?" The investors stormed off without a word, faces thunderous. Richard Watson and a few die-hard cronies were left standing alone, swallowed by a chorus of angry voices. I stood there, silent, watching. There was no need for me to say anything more. The truth had spoken, and it was louder than any threat Richard could ever make. 2 days after that crushing defeat at the lake, the story had already spread all over town. The local newspaper's front page screamed in bold headlines, "Maple Ridge HOA accused of power abuse. Landowner reclaims Carter Lake ownership." The cover photo, Richard Watson, looking utterly bewildered, being ordered by police to shut down the fishing tournament. That afternoon, Maple Ridge HOA called an emergency meeting. Emma and I were there, quietly sitting in the very back row, a thick stack of evidence in our hands. The air in the room was taut as a stretched wire. Angry residents slammed their fists on tables demanding answers. Shouts for transparency erupted from every corner. Accusations flew unchecked. Richard Watson, looking utterly disheveled, dragged himself to the podium. His voice trembled as he stammered, "We have, misunderstood the management rights of the lake. I was, merely following historical agreements." But no one believed him anymore. A resident shouted, "You lied to us for over a decade. Where's the maintenance money for the lake? Where's the money from all those events?" Another furious resident waved his HOA dues statement in the air. $5,000 a month, and now we find out the lake doesn't even belong to the community? I want to know where all our money went. There was no saving Richard. Right there. During the meeting, 5 out of the 7 HOA board members resigned on the spot. A middle-aged woman with thick glasses, representing the Maple Court District, stood up and read aloud, "We, the residents of Maple Ridge, demand a full independent audit of all HOA funds for the past 10 years. We demand the submission of all financial documents to the authorities. And we demand the initiation of legal action against Richard Watson for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust." Richard didn't wait for the meeting to end. He hastily stuffed his papers into a bag, fled to his glossy black BMW, and tore out of the parking lot, never to be seen again. Later, rumors spread. He had fled to another state. The police were actively investigating him for financial fraud. The burned investors were preparing to file a class-action lawsuit. The Maple Ridge Empire, that counterfeit kingdom, collapsed overnight. For me? I stood up and walked directly to the podium, looking across the room, a sea of residents now filled with confusion, anger, and betrayal. I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "I don't hate you. I don't hate the Maple Ridge community. What I hate is the lies and greed that led us to this day. Carter Lake has always been private property, but my grandfather, and now I, have always believed that those who respect nature, who cherish freedom, deserve to share in its beauty. If you are willing to honor truth and respect the law, I am willing to work with you to open parts of the lake for community use. properly, legally, and with dignity. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Then, slowly at first, scattered applause broke out. Tentative, hesitant, then swelling into a rising, thunderous ovation that echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling of the community hall. That day, Ben Carter, the lone cowboy, didn't just reclaim his ancestral land. He awakened a community that had been sleeping far too long under a blanket of deceit. After the battle with the Maple Ridge HOA, I stood amidst a fractured community. But in that wreckage, I saw opportunity. An opportunity to do the right thing, just like my grandfather once taught me. Land is a blessing, Ben. No one truly owns it. We are merely its caretakers for the next generation. A few weeks after the scandal, under the encouragement of the honest residents who remained, Emma and I launched a new plan. We founded the Carter Lake Conservation Trust, a nonprofit organization. We opened a portion of the lake to the Maple Ridge residents under strict, controlled use. We established rigorous rules for environmental protection and proper conduct for any activities on the lake. We organized an official community meeting, and this time, there were no phony political theatrics like Richard Watson's. I stood before the crowd, unrolling the old map of Carter Lake across the table. This isn't just a lake. This is history. This is the sacrifice of my grandfather and the Carter family across 3 generations. If you want to be a part of it, it won't be through seizing it. It will be through honoring it. The new terms were passed by open vote. Only residents who signed a pledge to protect the environment would be granted permission to use the lake. The usage fees were set low, just enough to cover maintenance, with no more shady HOA skimming. Public. Events like fishing tournaments would only be allowed after proper permission from the Conservation Trust, with all proceeds directed toward fundraising or nature conservation. No more exploiting the lake to sell real estate projects. A new sign was erected at the lake entrance. Carter Lake Conservation Area, private land. Welcome to those who honor nature and respect the truth. On the day of the reopening, I sat on my grandfather's old boat, the very one the HOA once tried to haul off to auction. Beside me was Sam Parker, that stubborn old man laughing heartily. Ben, I reckon old man Carter's grinning ear to ear up there right now. Not many folks hold on to their ancestral land these days. Even fewer manage to turn it into something better. I just smiled, gripping the oar tighter. As I dropped a baited line into the sparkling water, I watched families pitching tents along. The grassy banks, children's laughter ringing out across the lake, and the residents of Maple Ridge, now humble and grateful, picking up trash, tending the grounds, treating every inch of land as if it were their own treasure. That was the true victory, not merely protecting the land, but turning a battle into a legacy for the generations to come. Inside my cabin, I hung a small wooden plaque beneath an old photo of my grandfather, proudly smiling on the dock with a giant fish in his hands. Protect this lake as you would your own life. Because in truth, you're protecting your future. And so, in the wind-swept peace of that day, Carter Lake wasn't just saved. It was reborn, just as it was always meant to be. My grandfather once said, "Land isn't just the ground we stand on, it's where we leave our name, or lose it forever if we lack the courage to defend it." I'm proud that the Carter name still stands strong. And I hope this story serves as a reminder to us all. Freedom is never a gift. It's always the prize, won by those who refuse to bow down.